Good Thursday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com mailbag podcast with Rob Lewis and Austin Price. I'm Brent Hubbs. Our podcast always brought to you by our good friends at Blue Water Climate Control. Be sure and check them out online at bluewaterclimatecontrol.com, or you can give them a buzz at 865-299-2290 for all of your heating and air needs. You can book an appointment online. You can check out all their services. Whatever your heating and air needs are, Blue Water Climate Control can take care of you. Give Jeremy and his staff a call today or visit them online at bluewaterclimatecontrol.com. Check them out on Twitter at blueh2o_climate. Let's jump right into the podcast mailbag questions here for this podcast. And we'll start with first question out of the gate. Feldman, Brad Edwards, and other national media types keeps mentioning Freeze and UT. Brad Edwards even went as far as say UT views him as Pruitt's replacement if we make a move, and we could go in that direction if A&M blows the Vols out. Is this stuff being fed to them by Jimmy Sexton? I don't know that it's fed by Jimmy Sexton specifically, but I think there's a narrative out there and a thought out there from some people that if Saturday goes ugly, then who knows what might happen. If Saturday's close, I think most people feel like that Jeremy Pruitt's going to be back as Tennessee's coach next year. But Austin, as you said on many occasions, in this day and age, it only takes one or two people to make that decision. And that may not be the athletic director's decision.
Well, exactly. And I mean, and Brant, when you really look at, that's kind of just like sports in general, or I mean, look at recruiting. I mean, like, how many times have you seen, something that we thought and even the coaches thought was a slam dunk, and then one person changes their mind or has questions about a kid, and then the kid doesn't get signed, he gets dropped, or they go in a different direction. Same thing can happen with your head football coach. I mean, if things were to go poorly Saturday, or even if they don't, I mean, nothing's stopping, the money people from coming in and saying, okay, enough's enough. Now, do I think that's a bit of dirty pool when you've got on the phone with several of these recruits this week and told them that, Jeremy Pruitt's going to be safe? I mean, I kind of do think that's kind of dirty pool. But I mean, like, look at the whole thing in general. I mean, kids bolt. I mean, Tennessee, I think made a mistake in waiting too long to cut some of these kids they knew that they've known for a while they were going to cut. And wait until the end probably wasn't the best move. But it kind of is what it is.
Rob, we've just learned in the last 20 years, 18 years, 20 years covered this, anything's possible. Auburn proved that last week, right? I mean, you just never know.
USC proved it about 11 years ago.
Yep, absolutely. You never have any idea what's going to happen.
I mean, I can vividly remember sitting and talking to Kessler. We were watching basketball practice and telling him, like, man, there's no way they get all the way down the lane. There's no way they get all the way down the lane. And then probably about 4 hours later, they were all the way down the lane.
Yeah, absolutely. So anything is possible. All right, let's go to I Heart Vols. Since the one-time transfer rule seems to be a foregone conclusion, what do you see as some of the unintended consequences of it, especially if the SEC doesn't allow interconference transfers?
You've been talking about it for weeks. I mean, there's going to be more kids than there is homes.
Yeah, there already is now.
Yeah.
I mean, the supply and the demand are not going to match up at all. I mean, like, I think that there's going to be a far greater supply of players than the demand from the colleges. I just think that some of these kids are in for a rude awakening, which I go back to, I think that some of these smaller programs that have success have a chance to build upon that and have more success, because I think some of these, solid players, maybe they're not great players, but solid players fall to them.
Yep, and if you've got a great player at that smaller level, then you may lose them to a bigger school.
That's right.
If you got a good quarterback, Liberty's got a good quarterback. He might not be their quarterback next year. He might have a place to play. So that's a consequence that could be out there as well. I think one of the other consequences potentially is, as a coach, how do you have to deal with those kids? The ones you're trying. I mean, like, particularly a freshman who's going to be upset quicker and says, "Hey, I don't have to sit out anywhere. I can bolt." Do you have to play that kid? What do you have to do with the young players to keep them happy?
I keep going back to the fact, and we talked about this on Monday. I just think the whole de-recruitment, it's just not going to happen. You're going to be recruiting these guys 24/7, even after you already got them on campus.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt. I mean,
the great coaches aren't.
That's true. I mean, and the established coaches aren't. The ones that what you're getting into when you go there. And maybe those kids, if you don't want to stick around, then those coaches say, hey, I'll go find another one because we're established. We have our program in place, and we're going to do it my way. And the kid knows that when he comes there. But for some others, then I think it's going to be interesting to see.
I agree for some, but Saban's an extreme example, but I guarantee you that the head basketball coach over here is not going to be de-recruiting any freshman and his dad. And there'll be a lot of other coaches like that in both sports.
Yes, there'll be. I mean, the established ones, they'll be that way. Absolutely, there will be for sure. And basketball's probably had to deal with this, Rob, longer than football's had to deal with it. The transfer deal, because you're dealing with smaller numbers.
Yeah, it does seem like it kind of was ahead of the curve. Yeah, smaller numbers. I mean, if you're a sophomore and you see a freshman, you're already battling with at your position. They signed another guy that's coming in the next year when you're going to be a junior. You can see the writing on the wall. Probably a lot clearer, less opportunity.
All right, let's go to UT Vol fan 29. Different type of question here. In the social media age and how it definitely impacts recruiting and athletes, how much do you think schools might use, planted negativity to influence recruits? By that mean having people pose as fans of other schools and post negative things towards recruits under the guise of being a fan of a competitor.
Oh, I think that goes on now. I mean, I really do. I believe that goes on now across college football or across college athletics.
Wow, AP spotting the black helicopters.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some of that out there. I don't think there's any doubt that, that there's, and I don't know that all of it's orchestrated by coaches somewhere or recruiting offices somewhere, but I think that's just inevitable.
I mean, I just think when you look at, all the stuff that's out there about, like right now, if you're recruiting against LSU, you don't think that, you're not, got some burner Twitter accounts that are tweeting at player X, the USA Today link or whatever about, the LSU's trials and tribulations. I just think that goes on. I mean, I don't see it because it's not in my timeline, but.
Or maybe even more accurately, effectively to player X's mom.
Yeah, to the parent, to make sure that the parents see it. No doubt about that. To 10, Ken, 1985, name a freshman who's raised your eyebrows, surprised you, and care to comment on the report that Pruitt would rather coach at Alabama than put up with this stuff at Tennessee. I'll take the second one. I don't know that he said, I've never heard him say that. I said this before. I think there have been times where Jeremy Pruitt has said, look, if they fire me, I'll go back to Alabama and go to work for Nick Saban. And I do believe that's the case. I don't think he's strutted around. I don't know that he's strutted around, going, I don't want to be here. I'd rather be back as a defensive coordinator than to put up with the stuff that we have here or the stuff that we're dealing with here. I mean, I've never heard him say that. Now, as for the freshman who's raised your eyebrows the most, anybody want to jump in here?
I mean, is he talking about this year's team, I suppose?
Yes.
I think Jabari Small. Jabari Small for me is honestly surprised me more than anybody because, I mean, again, everybody assumed he was just a take to get to go. And yet here he's probably had more of an impact on the field than Omari Thomas this year as far as just pure production.
He should have played more.
I mean, Jalen Hyatt, we've all known he was going to be a player since, early in his arrival. And then I think some of these other guys you just don't know yet. There's not a greater sample size. But I mean, I think if you really look, if you're asking me like two guys that have really surprised me, Tamarion McDonald and Jabari Small, two guys that if you were out of those five kids from Memphis, if you were ranking them, I think most people would have ranked those two 4 and 5.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that assessment completely. That would be my pick. Those would be my picks as well. Vol 87 wants to know, where do you think we finish in the final recruiting rankings and how many wins could you see this team winning next year? with a legitimate off season. Rankings, Austin, what do you think?
I
12 to
don't know.
20, 12 to 17, somewhere in there?
Yeah, I think somewhere in there. And, I think the hardest part of that is, Brent, let's say Tennessee leaves 5 spots open or 4 spots open. You're not going to have any kind of feel for what kind of impact any kind of transfers are. That's not going to be linked into your ranking. Now, maybe that's something that, the recruiting services will do now that that's going to become more of a thing. But like in my opinion, like, you could have the 12th ranked class, but then if you get the right 3 or 4, transfers, your class is more like a, 5 to 10 class because, those 4 or 5, players have come in and helped you way more early on than, any 4 or 5 high school kids could.
Well, and I'll say this. I mean, if the one-time transfer rule goes into effect where you have guys who transfer and are eligible immediately with multiple years of eligibility, then I think we as a recruiting service and rivals have to look at re-ranking that in some way. If you're getting a potential 3-year player as a transfer instead of a 12-game player, I think there's a market there for a re-ranking of those things in the summertime after the transfers are complete. Guys are in schools, particularly if they're going to play for and have, potential to be on a roster and make an impact for multiple years. Rob, how many wins could you see this team getting next year with a legitimate off season?
I get 8. I think 8's pretty doable. I mean, I don't see them being any of the big 3, and it's hard for me to think that they'll just run the table on everybody, the rest of them.
I'm going to take a cop-out answer here, and I'm going to say, Tennessee could win as few as 6. They could win as many as 9. I just think there's that kind of range there, because when you look at who they play, their non-region games. I feel like I'm talking high school football. Their non-conference games should all be wins. They should be 4-0 in that. And then what do they do in league play? Do they have another dud year where they go 2-6?
Yeah, I'll say this.
They'll go 4-4, 5-3. I mean,
I think the big thing for me is, can they avoid that game? Okay, I look back at this season. Obviously, there's multiple games when you look at Auburn, you look at Arkansas, but you can't lose to Kentucky. Okay, you got no business losing to Kentucky, right? The year before it's the Georgia State. Okay, they got to avoid that game. That it was Vanderbilt in year 1. That game was like, what was that? I think that's what they've got to avoid that, and then if they can't, then they're going to be probably a 6 or 7 win football team next year. But they could win 8. I'm with Rob. I don't see them winning. I don't see them beating a big 3 unless just on that day some things fall their way. But you never say never.
Again, if you just simply chalk it up that Tennessee's going to beat Pittsburgh and win the other 3 cupcakes, and they're 4-0, Tennessee's best year since Phillip was fired was 2015, and then last year Tennessee went 5-3 in league play, which would mean 9-3 would be the best they could do, just basing off recent history. That's right. Absolute best, and then everything went down from there.
All right, go ahead.
No, I was just, Tennessee had a couple of years of 4-4, so that would be an 8-4 type season, which is what you guys are saying.
Next question. I would like for each of you to list your top 3 most important things this team or program must do between the end of this season and next year's opening game. Rob, I'll start with you. 3 things that are a must for this team.
What's your offensive identity / what are you doing at quarterback? I mean, you go all in on Harrison Bailey. If so, figure out what he can do, what your strength is, what your angle is. I mean, figure out what you're going to do with your staff. I mean, are you going for recruiters? You're going for developers? You're going for a mix? And wow, number 3. I mean, if you're just talking personnel wise, I think quarterback is the big deal, and I think staff is pretty clearly number 2. And I don't know that I have a third one that's really pressing. Those two kind of jump out at me as being far and away the most critical elements.
AP?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this is going to be a crossover. I mean, I totally agree. I mean, number one is offensive identity and quarterback. Number two is I do think that they need to make some changes on their staff. You know, we'll see how many they make. You know, I think that's, you know, that's paramount that Tennessee, you know, obviously you're going to have a new D-line coach, but I think that ultimately you probably need to, you know, make a couple other changes if Jeremy's going to be back for 2021. And then number three, you know, I think that, you know, it's just kind of, you know, have the off season, you know, of finding out who your leaders are. Because I feel like the leadership on this current team is not very good. Now, I do think that part of that is COVID. I think COVID's not been a reason why Tennessee's lost games, but I think their leadership or lack thereof, and a big part of that is COVID. I think a guy like Cade Mays came in here. Cade Mays may, you know, be close with Cooper and Trey and some of those offensive linemen. I don't think Cade's real close with the rest of the team, and that's not on him or anybody else. I think, you know, most of these guys, because of COVID, when the practice is done, they retreat back to their little cubby hole because why? They don't want to get COVID and have to miss time and all that. So I don't think that there's a lot of team bonding. Tennessee needs to have a more normal offseason where you get back to the team bonding, the team building, and, you know, kind of being a one big nucleus and one big unit, more so than just a bunch of guys that, you know, retreat to their rooms, they play Call of Duty, and then come out and practice for a couple hours a day.
All right, a couple more recruiting questions here. Now that the 21 class is wrapping up, what are the biggest position needs in this class, in the 22 class? Who are some of the main targets out of state, and are there any 22 kids ready to jump in the boat? Austin, I'll let you take that one.
Well, I mean, I think Tennessee has been in a great spot with Jordan James for a while. The running back from Oakland, he makes the most sense, you know, in state to me, as far as most likely to jump in the boat. Tennessee obviously would love to, you know, land Ty Simpson. They'd love to land Walter Nolan. They'd love to land, you know, several of these in-state kids. You know, Cam Miller, Dallin Hayden, I can keep naming them. Out of state, you know, Addison Nichols makes, you know, a ton of sense because, you know, Tennessee's been long positioned very well there. You know, they're going to be big in the, you know, try to be big in the state of Alabama again. They'll try to be big in the state of Georgia in 2022. You know, whereas they weren't as heavily involved in Georgia in 2021. There weren't, you know, there was a couple of guys, but they weren't as like, it's not like in recent years where Tennessee had, you know, 25 guys they were going after. There was more like 9. And so, you know, I think it's more about states. I don't think Tennessee will be as heavily involved in North Carolina. That seems like a down year there. I think Tennessee would love to be more involved in Virginia in 2022.
All right. Hunter wants to know, he keeps reading about how the coaching staff will be looking for a transfer or two in his class. Have you heard of any names in the portal thus far looking UT's way that the staff could consider taking? I'll also ask the opposite question. Are there any guys currently in the portal the staff covets considering Tennessee? Austin, you threw out a name about a quarterback today, right?
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee, you know, would love to, you know, land, you know, Houston Baptist transfer quarterback Bailey Zapp. You know, he's a guy that, you know, throws it all over the, you know, the lot down there, and you know, put up big numbers this year in a 4-game schedule, almost upset Texas Tech. You know, 15 touchdowns, 1 interception, threw for over 500 yards against the Red Raiders. You know, and kind of has some moxie. I talked to a former Tennessee assistant, Walt Wells, who's the head coach at Eastern Kentucky. They actually played Houston Baptist this year. And, you know, he said that the kid, you know, really has some moxie to him, was a kind of a trash talker during the games, was you know, real super competitive, and, you know, was really impressive, and feels like he could be a Power 5 quarterback.
Next question. Also, why do you think this staff has had a hard time signing corners, defensive back, cornerbacks in particular, given the forte of Ansley and Pruitt?
It is a bit bizarre. I don't disagree. I know with Demarius McGee committed to Tennessee early, but then there were some people in that school that were huge LSU people, and they kind of got in his ear. And when it got steamrolling towards the Tigers, Tennessee tried and tried, couldn't do anything to kind of flip it. So, I think that's a reason they lost Demarius McGee. Nyland Green, I think that was more of a product of Tennessee's losing streak and the fact that Athens is 45 minutes away. I think Tennessee needs to find a top shelf corner in 2022, or you really do kind of like scratch your head at the fact that Tennessee really can't get in on guys like Dejon Warren. I think Tennessee could have been a factor there, but then he had off the field issues that Tennessee didn't want to touch. And I wonder if that's what happened with Georgia, and that's why he ended up at Jacksonville State to play for Dion.
Any chance Joseph Anderson transfers with the coaching change there? Have you heard anything?
I mean, like he looked a year ago at maybe doing it and then stayed. I just don't know if Tennessee would have real interest there. I mean, Tennessee wanted him when he came out of high school, but he's not done a whole lot in 2 years there. Would they want to go down that route? I don't know. I mean, like I wouldn't say no, but I don't think I'd say yes either. Like I think it'd be something that Tennessee'd have to really think long and hard about.
All right, 2 more football questions, and we're going to hop into a couple of hoops things here as we wrap up the podcast. Rob, jump on in here on this football question as well. With the incoming class clouding the running back room, who do you see being moved into what positions? And with the loss of Wolf, does that lead Trinity Bell to getting a more serious look at tight end? And I'll throw in there another question somebody had about Austin Pope. Do you think that he comes back for another year? Let's start with the tight end question. At this point, do you guys see Austin Pope coming back?
No.
I mean, I don't have any inside info. I think it's really tough for that guy. I mean, he's been through so much.
Yeah, I would think of that. You think Trinity Bell's serious look at tight end, or do you think that they're pretty comfortable with Miles Campbell and Trinity Bell gets a look at defensive end and ultimately maybe even an offensive line position when it's all said and done, depending on how big he is?
Trinity Bell, I think, will get every bit of a shot to play tight end, and then we'll see, what happens with him physically. Does he grow out of it? But his basketball skill set tells me that, he could end up potentially being the best of all of them. But we'll see.
What about the running back room? Jeremy Pruitt saying on Wednesday that you need 6 running backs. He's got a bunch of them back there. All those guys can't stay at running back, right?
No, I mean, I don't see Lenny Whitehead staying at running back. I don't see, to me, the X factor is D-back with, he shows promise, but he also could play a number of different positions. Cody Brown's a running back. That's all he can play. Jalen Wright, Tennessee likes his speed too much to move him. And then, obviously they are the most high on Tyon Evans, who they think is a real game changer and then a real bruiser at tailback.
Yeah, certainly the case there. One more football here. I just saw this one. Would like to think this would not be the case, but do you think that Pruitt is not giving JT Shrout a fair shake since he was Helton's guy? Shrout's arm talent and touch seemed to be by far the best on the team. JG could throw a pick 6 with the best of any of them, but never really got pulled right away. Do you think that, Rob, that JT Shrout's had a quick trigger, had a quick hook?
I mean, he might have had a quick hook, but I don't think Jeremy Pruitt is like, damn it, that's Helton's guy. I'm pulling him out.
You don't think he's holding the grudge?
No, I don't. I mean, I think if it gave him a better chance to win a football game, they'd play the devil. And that's as how football coaches are. But I totally dismiss that. I think the reason he's not gotten more of a shot is you saw it in the second half at Vanderbilt when he fell off his back foot into double coverage.
Yeah. On the defensive line, go ahead.
Can't you just see it now? I mean, get in there, Lucifer. I mean, I got to win this thing.
Another question here, AP, is rumors on the D-line coach, Bo Davis, I think is where that starts. I'm not saying it's where
I mean,
but don't you think that's where it starts?
Yeah. My question, though, is with the uncertainty, does that hamper Jeremy in trying to make this hire?
Does Bo Davis want to stay in the NFL too, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that he would, honestly, out of all of them, I think he prefers to get back to college more so than a guy like Tosh. But, again, I just wonder, like, with the skepticism out there and the noise, does a guy like Bo Davis kind of go, yeah, I'm gonna wait?
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm not saying it does. I'm just saying, like, to me, like, I just thinking that on both sides.
Probably the same concern with this name, but any chance that they could bring Rodney home, Hubbard?
No, I don't think so. I think he's too entrenched with all the power people at Auburn. Former player, he's been there. Rodney stopped moving. I mean, Rodney's not even interviewed for a job in a while. Rodney might look to move if the new coach comes in and he doesn't like and feels like that's a bad fit. But if Kevin Steele gets that job, which it seems like that's what that's setting up for right now. Now it's not to the finish line.
That's sexy.
But if it's Kevin Steele, then Rodney Garner is going to be probably the assistant head coach on that team or the associate head coach on that team because he and Kevin Steele have a good relationship. And I think Rodney's probably helped Kevin Steele get to know some of the important people that you need to know at Auburn, which ultimately has probably helped Kevin Steele be in the position that he's in right now to potentially get this job. So, again, not done at Auburn. They may go some different direction, but it's certainly starting to look at some of the national media's tweets. Everybody seems to be jumping on board how real of a candidate Kevin Steele is, which makes you wonder and think if that thing's not getting somewhat close to being done. It certainly feels like he's the only name you're really hearing him talk about right now, right? I mean, you're not hearing.
It sounds like crystal ball fell through, or if like maybe that's what they wanted to do and it didn't. I mean, I'm just reading tea leaves.
And maybe that's by design though. Maybe they want everybody looking at Kevin Steele and they're going to pull a rabbit out of their hat. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just devil's advocate here.
Well, and here's the other thing too. You don't know exactly who's running that search down there because obviously the AD didn't even know what was going on. So again, we'll see. I don't think Rodney's going to make that move. All right, these basketball questions are out there. We got to get to these things. Rob, how good is Jaden Springer playing? Do you think by tournament time he might be the best offensive player on this team?
I mean, Fulkerson's pretty darn efficient, but I mean, Jaden's playing really, really well. I mean, I thought the other night, I mean, it's just Appy State, so you don't want to go crazy, but he's just playing so under control. He's not forcing things, not putting up bad shots. The other night he was 6 for 8, and I mean, I wrote about it and talked about it before he got here, but his ability to get into the paint, absorb contact, and still square up and get a good shot up, it's elite. I mean, the way he uses the jump stop to create space, to eat up space and get where he wants to go. He's the short answer, yeah, he's playing really, really good. Will he be the best offensive player on the team? Yeah, maybe. But I mean, they've got a lot of good guys.
Has he been better than you thought he would be out of the gate?
No, I had pretty high expectations. I mean, I'm not surprised to see him scoring in double digits early, playing good defense. I guess the thing I'm most surprised on is just how under control he's been, how he's not forced shots. And I'm not saying, I mean, he played with great players at IMG, so he's used to, not taking 20 shots in a game. But, I've seen him in the summer times when he is the best player on his team. And, taking 20 shots a game is something that he is not adverse to doing. But I honestly don't know that he's taking a bad. Maybe he has. I'm just missing it. But I'm surprised at how efficient he has been offensively. I mean, not blown. I knew he was going to be, or thought he was going to be good, but the kind of, just how in control and efficient he's been, I think is really big time for a freshman.
Rob, have you ever seen a team start 5 left-handers?
I don't think it's ever happened before. I think Tom Sokoviak has put this in the game notes. Now, I don't know where he got that research, and maybe I'm misspeaking, but I think Tennessee's SID has perhaps made note of that. And no, I have never seen it. It at least ties a record. We know that much.
He also says you can't. I mean, that lineup's not going to stay all left-handers because at some point Johnson or Springer is going to get in the starting lineup, aren't they? I
mean, I would think so. I mean, it's not. I mean, God, you're sitting Victor Bailey, who was the leading scorer in the team the other night. You're going to sit Josiah James, who had 11 points, and you're not going to sit him, but you're going to play him less. Josiah had 11 points, had more rebounds than anybody on the team with 8. Was 3 of 3 from 3. So, but as good as they've been, I think Keon and Jaden are more talented. But then again, I also don't think it matters that much because you look at those 5 guards, Steve Vescovi in there. Nobody played less than 19 minutes. Nobody played more than 24. I mean, and I think that's how it's going to be pretty much all year long, no matter who gets your name called to start the game.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the minutes. Rick Barnes told the story on Volquest Wednesday night that he set the team down and he gave him like an index card or gave him a sheet of paper and said, "Hey, write down how many minutes you think everybody on this team should play." The whole team, 1 through 13 scholarship guys. He said they wrote it down. He gathered up the papers. They added up, and there was like 400 minutes total. He's like, you do realize there's 200 minutes in the game. Now cut everybody's time in half. Like, how do you figure that out? And I'm sure, Rob, that was a lesson to go, listen, you know what I mean? Like, everybody's going to have to buy in, and it's going to be about the team. And some nights you're going to play more than other nights and all that type of thing. But it's going to be interesting to see how the minutes shake out, how the rotations shake out when this, when it gets into the conference schedule and it gets into, I don't want to say tune-up games, but it gets into games where you're, it's a little bit different than what it's been right now where you're trying to figure everything out.
I mean, I think Rick's giving some clues. I mean, I think all those guards are going to play right at 20 minutes, give or take 2 or 3 a night, unless somebody just doesn't have it that night, or God forbid, they throw it into row 3 in the first 2 minutes of the game.
Then they're going to go sit beside.
Rick sits them until halftime. But I really think it's going to be an 8-man rotation with him throwing Olivier a bone now and then, to reward him, as long as he's practicing hard and is engaged. So, and I think it'll be a field thing. I mean, I don't think he's going to go in and say, you're getting 22 minutes, you're getting 19 minutes. If Jaden's lighting it up and playing good defense, maybe he gets 26 minutes. I tell you, the guy that kind of like read between the lines that is going to get more minutes than anybody there is Santiago. And, he might have 4 points and, 3 assists or whatever, but I think he does so much more for this team that shows up in the box score, just keeping the ball moving, getting people in the right spots. Like he had, Appy State's, it's, small sample size, but he scored 5 points, was 2 of 5 from the field the other night, had the highest plus minus on the team at 36.
Yeah, doing all the little things. Last couple of questions. Go ahead.
Don't you feel like, Rob, Camwa, and I know they've got higher hopes for him than maybe Derek Walker, but he just feels like he's kind of stuck in that Derek Walker plays it a scratch.
I think he's a better player than that, probably considerably, but with this team, he's stuck in that role that Derek Walker was in, for sure. I mean, he might get 4 minutes in the first half and then not play again. But as your 9th guy, he's pretty good.
All right, last question here. I want to get to this one. Now that the NCAA made a decision, or it appears that they're making a decision for immediate eligibility for one-time transfers, how quickly do you think Sankey and the SEC will make their decision? Do you think Sankey will have all the SEC coaches or ADs or presidents have a vote on if they would allow that to happen? If there is a vote that's required by the SEC, do you think most schools would be for it or against it to pass? I don't think this is going to be a slam dunk that it passes in the SEC, because I think there are some ADs and presidents that are against it.
Is that a destined vote, don't you think? Face-to-face in a locker room?
I think it has to happen quicker than that. If it passes in January,
so too.
If it passes in January, I think it has to happen quicker than that. I just don't think it's a laydown. I don't think it's a guarantee, but we'll see what happens. But
it just means more here.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see. I know there's some ADs in this league that are against it, and are not that will fight or will protest it or will certainly throw up opposition to it because they think it's bad for the league because it's going to create so much recruiting. Kids who are already on campuses, continued recruiting them and problems there. So I don't think there's a ton. I don't think everybody in the league is all in. It probably will end up being that it passes because everybody else in the country is going to do it, but it will be a heated discussion to get to that point.
And it will be a nightmare. Like when a kid goes from, Auburn to Alabama or vice versa, or Ole Miss to Mississippi State, just brutal.
Yep, it certainly will be that. All right, time to get out the door here. That's going to do it for this edition of the Volquest.com Mailbag Podcast presented by Blue Water Climate Control. DT4U2, here's your question. The Nike contract ends in the year of 22-23. I do think Nike will renew it. I don't know that it'll be as financially beneficial as some of the other Nike deals are with where kind of things are in athletics at this point. We've not seen some of those huge deals like we have in the past. But that contract is up in year 8, which is 22-23. That's going to do it for this podcast. For Austin Price and Rob Lewis, I'm Brent Hubbs. Have a great rest of your Thursday, everybody.